Ethan Cross woke before sunrise, the way he always did. The sky was still streaked with gray and lavender, the last of the night holding on, as the first light brushed across the ridge. He poured himself a cup of coffee, the kind that tasted a bit like dust and metal from the well water he'd been drinking for 20 years. The routine was comforting. The sound of the percolator, the faint creak of the wood floors, the slow stretch of silence before the world began to stir. When he turned the kitchen faucet to rinse his cup, nothing came out. Just a hollow, wheezing sound like a throat gasping for air. He frowned, twisted the handle again, harder this time. Still nothing. His brow furrowed as he tried the bathroom sink. Dry. The shower, dry. Even the outdoor spigot, dry as a bone. Damn it, he muttered, setting the mug down. His well had never failed, not once. It was drilled deep, 200 feet into solid limestone, fed by an aquifer that had never run low even in drought. Something was wrong. He stepped outside, boots crunching over the gravel drive, scanning the ridge below. Normally at this hour, he could see the glitter of sprinklers and the glint of dew across Pine Creek estates. The HOA development that had sprung up years after his father passed. Today, not a single sprinkler shimmered. The lawns, usually glistening under automatic watering systems, were eerily still. That's when he saw it. A white SUV idling at the end of his lane, the Pine Creek HOA logo emblazoned on the side. Standing next to it, clipboard in hand, was Marjorie Dane, president of the HOA and self-appointed queen of the valley. Her posture was rigid, smug even, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. "Morning, Ethan," she called, with the kind of cheer that made his teeth grind. "You're finally awake up here in your little farmhouse?" He didn't bother to smile. "Morning, Marjorie. You know something about why my water's out?" She gave a little laugh. "Too light, too casual. I figured you'd notice soon. The HOA voted yesterday to suspend your community water privileges. Unpaid violation fees, you understand?" Ethan stared at her, unsure if he'd heard right. "You what?" Her lips curled in satisfaction. "You've ignored multiple warnings. Unapproved livestock, unpainted fencing, the tacky old sign advertising your lumber mill. Our bylaws are clear. You pay the fines or lose access to community services." He took a slow step forward, folding his arms. "Marjorie, you listen to me real carefully. I don't have community water. I drilled that well myself. You and everyone down there are using my supply. Every drop that comes out of your fancy irrigation systems runs through my pumps." She tilted her sunglasses down, just enough to look over them, smirking. "Oh, please, Ethan. That well might be on your land, but it's part of the shared infrastructure now. The HOA manages all utilities." He laughed once, sharp and humorless. "No, the HOA thinks it does. Your developer signed a contract with me years ago. Before your bylaws, before your landscaping committee, before your stupid pool rules, you're leasing my water rights." Her smug expression faltered for the first time. "That can't be right. The board would have records." "You don't have a clue where your water comes from, do you?" Ethan said quietly. "You've been drinking out of my well for 15 years, Marjorie, and you just shut off the one thing keeping this valley wet." Her jaw tightened. "If that's true, then it's a matter for the lawyers. Meanwhile, the HOA has rules, and even you must follow them." He stepped closer until they were eye to eye. "You've overstepped. You had no authority to touch my system. If you so much as lay another finger on my equipment, I'll have you charged with tampering with a private utility." Marjorie gave a stiff smile, though her voice wavered slightly. "Good day, Mr. Cross." She turned on her heel, climbed into her SUV, and drove off, leaving a plume of dust curling in the morning air. Ethan stood there for a long moment, jaw tight, heart pounding. He headed down the narrow dirt path toward the tree line where the old pump house sat. The building was squat, made of stone and steel, older than most of the homes below. He opened the padlock and stepped inside. The familiar hum of machinery was gone. The control panel lights were dead. He followed the power conduit with his flashlight, and there it was. The HOA maintenance crew had pulled the external breaker, locking it out with a tag marked Community Violation Enforcement. He could hardly believe it. They had actually come onto his property and shut down his system. The arrogance of it made his blood boil. He knelt beside the junction box, running his hand over the cold metal. "You idiots really don't know what you've done?" he muttered. He walked outside and scanned the valley below. From this high ridge, he could see everything: rows of manicured lawns, sun-faded rooftops, and the tiny silver glints of faucets being tested as neighbors began to realize something was wrong. "Let's see how long that HOA charm holds up when the sprinklers dry," he said under his breath. He trudged back into the pump house, dust motes swirling in the sunlight streaming through the high window. His hand brushed the side of the backup generator. Old, but reliable. He poured in a few gallons of fuel, flipped the choke, and pulled the cord. The generator sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. The control panel lights blinked back on. Gauges began to twitch as pressure climbed. A faint rumble rolled through the pipes, buried under the earth. Within minutes, water was flowing again. Not through the HOA's grid, but directly through his own bypass lines. He leaned against the wall, watching the numbers rise, a grim smile creeping across his face. He'd just taken back control of what was always his. From down the valley came faint echoes, shouts, calls, confusion. Homeowners stepping outside, realizing their taps had come back to life, unaware that it was Ethan, not their precious HOA, who'd restored it. He walked outside, taking a deep breath of the cool morning air. The wind carried the sound of barking dogs, sputtering lawn sprinklers, and the faint metallic rattle of irrigation pipes. The sun had fully risen now, washing everything in gold. He stared down at Pine Creek Estates, that grid of identical houses that had tried for years to box him in, to fine him for his chickens, his old barn, even the smell of his smokehouse on Sunday mornings. They had built their rules on land they didn't own, powered their lives on water they didn't control, and now they'd gone and bitten the hand that fed them. Ethan took another sip of his now cold coffee and let the bitterness settle on his tongue. "You want a war, Marjorie," he said softly to the valley below. "You just found one." He turned back toward the farmhouse, the faint hum of the generator steady behind him. The line between his land and the HOA's world had never felt clearer. And this time, he wasn't backing down. By the next afternoon, the Pine Creek clubhouse was boiling over with tension. The air conditioner had gone out hours earlier, and the place smelled faintly of sweat, perfume, and frustration. Dozens of residents crowded into the small conference room, waving papers and muttering angrily. The HOA board sat at the long oak table, faces tight with stress. Marjorie Dane, always impeccably dressed, looked like her nerves were held together with a safety pin. She tapped her gavel hard against the wood. "Order! We'll have order, please," she said sharply, her voice already fraying. The chatter didn't stop. One man at the back shouted, "My sprinklers are still dry." Another woman called out, "My kids haven't had a proper shower since yesterday. What are you people doing about it?" Marjorie forced a brittle smile. "We're aware of the situation and are addressing it promptly." This disruption is due to interference from Mr. Ethan Cross. He's tampered with the community's water systems, which is, hold up, a voice interrupted from the middle of the room. It was Greg Turner, a retired firefighter who'd lived in Pine Creek for a decade. Tampered? You mean the guy who owns the well you idiots shut off? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People turned to each other, whispering, confusion mixing with anger. Marjorie's smile faltered. That's misinformation, she said quickly. The HOA's infrastructure is managed collectively. Whatever water comes through that well is. The double doors at the back of the room swung open, cutting her off. Every head turned. Ethan Cross stepped inside, framed by sunlight from the glass doors behind him. He wasn't dressed for any kind of meeting. Dusty jeans, faded plaid shirt, work boots still caked with dirt. But his presence filled the room instantly. He walked in slow, deliberate steps, the kind of calm that made people instinctively move out of his way. In his hand was a thick folder, the edges worn from years of handling. Afternoon, everyone, he said evenly, his voice carrying across the crowd. Heard there was a meeting about me. Marjorie's eyes narrowed. Mr. Cross, this is a private session. You are not authorized to. Actually, Ethan interrupted, setting the folder down on the oak table with a firm thud. I'm the only one in this room who is authorized to talk about this. A low murmur spread through the audience. Marjorie looked flustered, glancing to her board members for backup, but none of them met her eyes. Ethan flipped open the folder, revealing a sheaf of yellowed documents, stamped, signed, and sealed. This, he said, tapping the first page, was the water rights agreement signed by your developer 20 years ago. It clearly states that Pine Creek Estates leases its water supply from my well, located on parcel 47A, my land. The agreement includes maintenance payments and guarantees access only so long as terms are met. He looked up, his gaze sweeping across the board. You've missed 3 payments. You've trespassed on my property. And yesterday, you cut power to my pump system, a privately owned utility under state jurisdiction. That's not a violation fee issue, Marjorie. That's tampering with an essential service. The room went silent except for the faint whir of a ceiling fan. Marjorie's face was red now. This is absurd. The HOA has full authority over its infrastructure. You can't just walk in here and threaten us. Ethan's tone stayed calm, steady. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm explaining what's already happened. I filed a complaint with the county utilities, commission and the water rights board this morning. They'll be here tomorrow to investigate. A woman in the front row gasped. You mean we could lose our water completely? Ethan nodded once. Until it's resolved legally, I've shut off the commercial supply. My farmhouse and the original well line will stay operational, but Pine Creek's grid is disconnected. You might want to start buying bottled water. The room erupted. People shouted over one another, waving their hands. Some yelled at Marjorie, others at Ethan. Someone near the back banged their fist on the wall. This is your fault, Marjorie, one man roared. You can't just cut a man's water because you don't like his chickens. Marjorie slammed her gavel down again. Quiet, quiet, all of you. He's bluffing. Ethan cut in, bluffing. Check your own records if you can find them. The well predates this subdivision by nearly 20 years. I installed the distribution system that feeds your lines. The developer rented access from me because drilling a new well was too expensive. That lease was renewed twice, but not by you. And now your HOA lawyer, whoever he is, will have to explain to the county why your board cut power to a system you don't own. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She glanced helplessly at the property manager, who looked pale and uncomfortable. "Eyes, is that true?" she hissed at him. He swallowed hard. I've seen some of those older contracts in storage. Yes, but..." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "You didn't even check before throwing your weight around, did you?" The crowd began to turn completely against her now. People stood, demanding explanations, calling for refunds on HOA dues, even shouting for her resignation. Marjorie tried to speak, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Ethan took a step back, watching the pandemonium with quiet satisfaction. "I told you yesterday, Marjorie," he said loud enough to be heard. "You can't punish someone when you don't even understand where your water comes from. You built this whole place on a system that isn't yours." A man in a golf polo called out, "So what happens now, Ethan? We just go dry?" Ethan sighed, folding his arms. "No, I'm not cruel. I'll keep emergency flow open until the inspectors finish their review. But from now on, the HOA pays what it owes, plus damages. And this time, the money goes straight to me, not into some committee fund that paints mailboxes." Laughter rippled through the crowd despite the tension. Even the property manager cracked a nervous grin. Marjorie stood frozen, gripping the edge of the table, knuckles white. "You can't humiliate me like this," she said, voice trembling. "You think you can hold the whole neighborhood hostage because of some old paperwork?" Ethan's eyes hardened. "No, Marjorie. I'm holding you accountable. There's a difference." He turned, walking toward the door as voices continued to rise behind him. Just before stepping out, he paused and looked back. "One more thing," he said quietly. "You call yourself the head of this community, but a real leader would have asked where the water came from before cutting it off. You ever do something like this again, you won't be dealing with me. You'll be dealing with the state." He pushed the doors open and stepped into the late afternoon sun. The heat hit him like a wall, but the air outside felt clean free. Behind him, the shouts grew louder. Angry, desperate, confused. Someone yelled for her resignation. Someone else demanded refunds. He could almost feel the whole brittle structure of that HOA beginning to crack. He walked across the gravel lot to his truck, the sound of cicadas rising from the trees. As he climbed in, his phone buzzed on the seat beside him. Half a dozen missed calls, 3 voicemails from local reporters, 1 from a county official asking to clarify the water rights situation. He started the engine, looking out toward the ridgeline where his farmhouse stood proud against the horizon. The wind stirred the grass, carrying with it the faint echo of distant sprinklers sputtering dry. He smiled to himself. For years they'd treated him like some stubborn old relic, a man out of step with their rules and committees. But today, Pine Creek finally understood the truth. They didn't own the land beneath their feet, or the water that gave their lawns life. Ethan Cross did. And for the first time in a long while, he felt the balance shift, the quiet satisfaction of a man who had taken back what was his all along.